Education changes lives. Cultural education changes communities. Ms. Tamara Richardson is our guest today, who is the director and founder of PACE 48, a multinational youth-led platform that promotes access to cultural education across 48 countries in the Asia-Pacific region. Ms. Richardson created PACE 48 in 2016 after struggling to find cultural education resources. What initially started as a Facebook page with the intention of sharing short videos on cultural content has evolved into a cultural education organization with permanent offices in Asia and Oceania. Through this platform, Ms. Richardson has grown to be a voice for intercultural relations all over the Asia-Pacific region. For her work in championing cultural diversity and cultural education, Ms. Richardson was appointed an associate of the UNESCO Chair in Intercultural and Interreligious Relations, Asia-Pacific in 2016, and has been actively engaged in the international treaty space since. So please welcome our amazing guest, Ms. Tamara. How are you today?
I am very well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Tamara, you've done so many things. You've traveled the world at this young age, and you recently graduated?
Yes, I recently graduated with my Master's in International Law from Melbourne Law School.
From Melbourne?
Yeah.
But you're a Brisbane girl?
I am from rural Queensland, so I'm not a Brisbane girl, but I have spent a lot of my time here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, PACE 48. What is PACE 48? And how did it start?
Yeah. So, growing up in regional, rural Queensland, I was always frustrated when I was young, and it was because I wanted to learn about different cultures. I wanted to travel, but I couldn't. And there just wasn't access to language education. I wanted to learn all of these Asian languages, and the schools in my town only offered one. And so when I went to university, I actually dropped out in my first year. I dropped out of UQ and I ended up moving to China because I really wanted to learn Mandarin. It was something I wanted to do, so I spent 2 years in East Asia, Southeast Asia, learning languages. And it was through that experience that I became really passionate about the Asia-Pacific region. So when I came back to study at UQ, I started a Facebook page. It started out as a Facebook page just to connect young people in Australia with young people in the Asian and Pacific regions to learn about each other so that different young people in Asia could teach us about their cultures and their histories so that we could better understand each other and kind of enhance cultural literacy. Mm-hmm. So it started from there and it just grew incredibly fast. And now we have 3 offices in Asia. We have partnerships, with different agencies and development organizations. So I think it embodies what the creative economy is. Yeah. And that you can kind of utilize these platforms to build something meaningful.
Yes, so PACE 48.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. PACE 48. So 48 countries are involved here. Is that correct?
Yes. 48. It encompasses the Asian region and the Pacific region. They are very diverse. So we cover a lot of the small Pacific Island states through to New Zealand and Australia, up to East Asia, so Japan, the Koreas, China, and then we move as west as Iran. Mm-hmm. So there's quite a lot of cultural and geographic diversity there.
Mm-hmm. Tamara, when I think of religion, culture, language, color, it's very hard for anybody to communicate to other culture. It's not easy. Right? The reason behind is I come from a different culture, you come from a different culture. The way I talk might offend you because that's not how you talk. And what you are doing is breaking the cultural barrier and trying to understand the culture.
Yeah, exactly. As you said, I think even the most smallest things, as you said, the way that I talk or hand gestures or the way that I approach you, do I hug you, do I kiss you on both cheeks, these are really important, particularly as, Australia promotes business with Asia. These are skills that our future leaders are going to need if they're going to be doing business with Asia, if they're going to be negotiating treaties with Asia. I think that we underappreciate how important cultural literacy is in these types of contexts.
Yes. Yes. And you realized it in a very young age, and coming from regional Australia, right? So how was it possible?
That's a very interesting question. I had a very non-traditional pathway to where I am. So when I was in the first and second grade, I didn't go to a normal school. I was homeschooled, and we actually travelled Australia. So here we were travelling Australia, being exposed to all these different cultures that were living in the spaces we were living in. It was really important to my parents that I was exposed to different perspectives about Australian history. And I think it was from that early exposure to different cultural communities that I was always interested. So going through the Queensland school system, participating in every single thing that I could that was related to cultural education, so learning Japanese, participating in public speaking competitions in Japanese. And when it came to, I guess, learning about the histories of different countries, which is something that I'm passionate about, going to the local charity shop, because our town didn't have a bookstore then, so we would go down to the charity shop and buy these history books, and it was through those pages learning about the rise of modern China or Napoleon in Russia. It was those stories that really got me interested in learning about different cultures and their experiences and their perceptions of history.
Wow. I was in an event, and I was talking, and this young girl came and spoke to me. She was from Thailand, and she said to me that it's very hard for me to talk and mingle with other cultures. When she's meant other cultures, especially Australians who are here, already born and brought up here. And I said, why is that so? And she said, I don't know, because whenever I see them or meet them, I freeze. And I said, there must be. You have to find out the reason. Later, she messaged me. She said, Rina, it's because the cultural barrier. She had an experience where she went to an event, everybody was greeted with a hug and a touch, except her, because of the way she looked. And she thought, what must be the reason? And she found out because somebody must have told the other person that in her culture, the hug and the touch is something not common. So she wasn't. So she was taken aback thinking that she's left out. So this one example taught me that there must be so many cultures, so many people who go through the same.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. One of the instances or examples that actually really pushed me to found PACE 48 was at the UNESCO Youth Dialogue in China. Just watching how a couple of the other youth delegates were interacting and making these assumptions about each other's culture as well, based off of what they'd seen in the media or what they'd been taught in their education systems in their countries to believe. Those separate understandings or lack of understanding can contribute towards, it does contribute towards the way that we see each other, the way that we interact. If we sit here in Australia and say you can't hug a Thai person, that's offensive, and we've learnt that here in Australia, in our relatively culturally homogenous classroom in rural Queensland where most people are Caucasian, and then we meet a Thai person and they might say, in their culture, it actually might not be offensive.
Yes.
But they haven't had that opportunity to share that.
Yeah.
That's really important to be addressing that. That's what PACE does.
Okay. So when a person contacts you, how does it start? What's the process?
To get involved?
Yes.
It's a very decentralized system because we cover so many countries. We have our operations, like our office operations as well. It really depends on whether it's a right fit. So we are an organisation and we want to ensure that the young people that we are working with are there for the right reasons. So we want people who are really committed to advancing knowledge about different cultures. So it's not as simple as saying, I want to get involved and here you are and here you can start. It's asking them, well, what do you see PACE helping you to achieve? Is there an area of the region that you want to gain more knowledge about, or a skill set that you want to advance? So we had a few young people in Australia, university students, saying, I would really love to learn more about India and Pakistan. And so we put them on a local team with Indian and Pakistani young people so that they could gain exposure to that. So generally we receive a lot of inboxes to our Facebook page.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So you get them connected.
Yeah.
To learn from the core members.
Yeah, exactly. I remember one of the first projects that we ever ran, we took a group of UQ students actually to Pakistan for a week. It was a lot of work, but it wasn't just the trip. They had to organise it. They had to work with different governments. They had to work with different stakeholders, which taught them and exposed them to international affairs across the region. And they had to work with the local youth. And the skills that they were able to strengthen, the knowledge that they were able to receive about how young people in India and Pakistan conduct their affairs is really invaluable experience, yeah.
And you have traveled to many countries.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay, what all countries have you traveled to? And why? I would like to know that.
Oh, that's a big question. I've lived in China twice. I'm very fascinated about the history, mainly the transition from empires to, how empires go through their revolutions and become these states at the end. That's something that I've always been fascinated in. So I've lived in Shanghai and Xi'an before, and through that I've been able to go to North Korea. I have been to Argentina as a special guest of UNESCO. I went to the G20 there.
How was your experience in North Korea?
I think it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Absolutely.
I think it's something that you have to assess what you can achieve in a situation like that. For me, as an Australian, and understanding the complexities of our region, the greatest advantage that I received from spending a week inside North Korea was really seeing the situation as it is. But better understanding the dynamic between the EU and North Korea. So I was one of two delegates from this side of the world, and then the rest were emerging European leaders. And that kind of really gave me a better understanding about how the EU could be better utilised in addressing the Korean Peninsula, denuclearisation of North Korea. So it was a very unique opportunity. Very unique.
So you were very young when you went there, and you learned so many things. So big girls at your age, I don't know.
Well, it was I was the only woman on the delegation as well, apart from one other woman who joined us halfway through. So it was me, and it was 19 European men, and it was, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about how gender plays into societal affairs. But yeah, my parents definitely have grey hair.
Of course.
But when you do go into a country like North Korea where you don't have access to the internet, you do have a contingency plan. So you have people in place where you say, here's my flight number, can you track it? And if I'm not here on this date at this time, you need to call this person, this person, this person.
That is scary, Tamara.
So, yeah, I had to have that conversation with one of my friends. I had to say to them, they work in the industry, and I said, this is my flight back to Beijing from Pyongyang, and if I'm not here, can you please contact these three people? I said to my parents, I gave them the itinerary, and I think my flight was delayed by an hour out of Pyongyang. So my parents were actually contacting my friends because I had given my parents my friend's number.
Yeah.
And they're saying, where's Tamara?
Where's Tamara? Scary. I'm surprised they allowed you to go. That's a very good thing.
There was a discussion. Right?
Yes. You had to convince them. Yeah.
There was a discussion. There was definitely a lot of discussions before I went. There was a lot of cost benefits calculations about, is it safe? Who am I going with? what's the correct protocol. I actually travelled there the day after the young Australian was released from North Korea. A couple, Alex, I forget his last name, but he'd been detained there. So there's a lot of consideration that goes into a trip.
Were you not scared?
No.
And why?
This might sound a bit, what's the word that I'm chasing? Narcissist, or I'm not sure, but I was confident that I had the profile to go into North Korea and come out of North Korea. I had the assurances. I knew who I was travelling with.
Yeah.
And I felt as if that was the safest organisation that I could enter North Korea with and come out.
And you did it.
Yeah.
And you went to Argentina next.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I went to Argentina. Every major multilateral forum, the G20, CHOGM, they usually have a youth forum on the side. And I was invited to the G20 Youth Summit in Argentina to speak. So I was a special guest of UNESCO, and they flew me over there to speak about PACE and, you know, the important role that modern technologies will play in accessing cultural education and how important cultural education will be for the future of work. So that was a highlight. Yeah.
Exciting. Yeah. And you mentioned that you want to be here. Now you want to spend your time in Australia, do something, and you've got a plan for it. So what are your plans?
Yeah, I think I've absolutely loved leading PACE. I love this region. I'm passionate about the Asia-Pacific region. But if it's taught me one thing about being in these spaces with policymakers and, you know, politicians and business leaders and other young people across the region, it's that we need to focus on home as well. And something that's really been bugging me lately that I'm going to be addressing, I've told you a bit about it, is cultural education within Australia. So it shouldn't matter whether you live in Chermside or Charleville or Charters Towers. My belief is that you should have the same access to cultural and language education no matter where you live. So thinking about how we can use technology to really level the playing field. I think we're on the doorstep of Asia. It is being described as the Asian century. We need to be encouraging Asian literacy in our education curricula. We have the tools, we have modern technologies.
Yes.
We're able to build websites and platforms. So it's more so looking at what PACE has been doing, but scaling it back into a new initiative for Australia. I'm not okay with the fact that Australia is second lowest in the OECD for year 12s graduating with a second language. That is something that I'm passionate about, and I plan on addressing it.
Excellent, excellent. So you want to introduce more South Asian languages?
Yeah, it's essentially democratizing access to languages. So if you think about how you access a language in Australia, it really depends on where you live. So Victoria has a fantastic system. You're able to learn a language in school. They actually legislated that you have to learn a language up to a certain year level. And they have built the infrastructure for that, so you can learn, I think, almost 20 languages.
That's excellent.
Some other states don't even have policy, so they only have to learn a language up to year 8. So I think essentially what our plan is to do is to make that access cheaper, while also thinking about who we can partner with to deliver that. So valuing the role that migrants play, the skills that they bring to our communities, the same with refugees and asylum seekers, providing employment pathways for them through language education, and really focusing on informal language education. So a lot of language programs, they cost thousands of dollars.
Absolutely.
So that you can get a tick. Why aren't we utilising peer-to-peer teaching and learning opportunities in this country?
Why do you think that's not happening?
I think we're very, well, as an Anglophone country, I don't think we've necessarily seen the political will at the national level or the state level to really prioritise language education. But I think as we market ourselves as being on the doorstep of Asia, and we increasingly diversify who calls Australia home, it's going to be important not just for how we engage with other countries, but how we engage with each other. And I think that learning a language is a fantastic opportunity to learning about a different culture.
You mentioned that there's only 6 international languages that are being taught here in Queensland?
So there's 6 priority, or 7, there's 7 priority languages. And essentially what that means is that schools can pick from them and teach them, or students can do them through distance education. Queensland is changing its policy, so you can now learn languages through community language schools, which are run in the community.
Yeah.
So that's a fantastic first step. The challenge that I see with that is that not everyone lives within access of a community language school.
Correct,
So
yeah.
if you're not living in the southeast Queensland pocket or one of the other major regional centres like Townsville, for example, you don't have access to those community language schools. So it's thinking about, how do we use technology to solve that problem? How do we use tech to ensure that someone who lives up in Cape York could learn a language?
Yeah. And I think we all have understood after the COVID that how technology can change the world and save 100%. A lot of time, a lot of electricity, and lot of workspace. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely. I definitely agree with you. Yeah.
And we can utilize for other causes. Yeah. So what will that help with, the cultural language, if we all start learning? How is that going to benefit?
I think it benefits the way that we engage with other countries.
How do we know which language, though? We have to choose. Too many languages, Tamara.
I would learn them all. I think it depends on our priorities as a nation. So data that I would be looking at is, who are we doing the most business with? Where are our new Australians, or our migrants and refugees and asylum seekers, where are they coming from? What languages do they speak? So this is the type of data that I would be looking at and thinking, yeah, these are the languages that we should be targeting.
Yes. Wow. So it looks like you're going to be the foreign minister soon. Any plans for future?
Can't confirm or deny that. If I do everything correct, I won't be.
No, we don't say that. No. Tamara, so you're going to have your PACE 48 right here in Brisbane and involve communities. How can people who are watching you be a part of it? How can people support you? Is there anybody you're looking for sponsors? How can the government help you? So what are the steps?
Yeah, so because I've been away for a couple of years, after I graduated from UQ, I said I'm moving to China to keep learning Mandarin. So I've been away for a couple of years, but it's great to be back. I feel like I've just slotted back in where I left off. Right now, we're really focusing on a sustainable plan for this, because we do want it to make an impact. We do want to ensure that 10 years from now, people, when they think about language education, they can come to us and say, my child wants to learn Hindi or Thai, and that's available to them. So right now we're doing a lot of planning, and we will be releasing some stuff shortly about where we're going. At this stage, we're planning to launch the language iteration that I've talked to you about for term 1 next year. That's a realistic goal for us. But anybody that's working in language education, cultural education, or who has experience working with refugee and asylum seeker communities, pathways to employment, we would love to talk to them. So best lessons learnt, and think about where we can collaborate.
Excellent. Tamara, you are one young, passionate woman that I have met, and I really love and respect what you do. So if there's anything that you would like to tell the youngsters to be like you, what would that be?
Go to bed at a reasonable hour every night. No. I think that modern technology has really changed the way that young people work today. It's not like how our parents work. It's not like how our grandparents work.
Yeah.
And I think that resilience is a really important part in this, particularly when you're working in cultural affairs. But my biggest piece of encouragement is just keep pushing on. Because if you get 5 people that say no, you'll get 1 person that says yes.
Yes.
And you just need the 1 person.
I like it. I like it. If you don't ask, the answer is no.
Exactly. You'll never know until you ask.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Tamara, pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
If our viewer want to find you and follow you and your work, where will they find you?
You can find me on Facebook. I'm quite active on there. LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn.
Tamara Richardson?
Yes.
Yes. And Pace 48 is your page?
Yes.
Yeah. Pace 48.
They're all on there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
If you want to follow Tamara, follow her on Facebook and the Pace 48 page, because there are upcoming events that you would like to know what this amazing young girl is out there ready for the world, isn't it? Tamara,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.